Hey everyone, Derek here. 'Tis the season for top 10 and best of types of lists. So I wanted to jump in on the fun and give you my top 10 list for DCTLs that are free that can help you with your color grading in DaVinci Resolve. And just a quick note for those of you who aren't sure how to get your DCTLs installed once they're downloaded, all you have to do is go to your settings under color management, open your LUT folder, drop them in, and restart Resolve, and they'll be good to go. And then under Effects, you just bring in DCTL. I will note too that DCTLs are only available in the studio version of Resolve. And before I get started, I just wanted to note, as per usual, I am color managing in CSTs, and my timeline color space is DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate. So let's get started. I'm not going to do a full breakdown of each of these, but hopefully give you the highlights where you can see the benefits of each and you can check them out more in depth on your own if you'd like. So to start off, at number 10 is Primal from Nico Fink at Demystify Color. And if I mispronounce anybody's name, my sincerest apologies. I'm just trying to give as much credit as I can to the people developing these. So with this DCTL, this is a nice thing for primary adjustments, especially if you're somebody that likes linear gain for your adjustments. This DCTL gives you photometric exposure and temp and tint controls, as well as some flare controls. So if you're somebody that likes linear gain, I'll switch this quickly here to linear, makes it 0. You can do this on your own with the gain operations here. But if you like using temp and tint, these don't really work quite as well. So if you're used to just trying to move this around just quite the way you want, and you wish you were a little more precise with temp and tint controls, this DCTL can come in quite handy because you have all the same things right here. You have your photometric exposure and temp and tint controls that use linear gain, but in a temp and tint fashion. So if you like to balance that way, this is really helpful. And then you also have flare control for the bottom and individual channels for each flare control, which is nice too. If you find these controls a little sensitive, you can always pull down the global blend to make them a little less touchy if you want a more fine-tuned control. So a very nice DCTL there. Okay, moving on to number 9 is Technicolor 3-strip from Henry Bobick. This is a nice creative DCTL. It gives a Technicolor 3-strip inspired color palette. It uses color crosstalk and some other fine-tuning that he's done. Just gives it a really nice, pleasing color palette in a film-like manner. And I can show you on the vector scope. I know what it does here. There's just one slider, which is nice. You can go a little bit of effect or you can go all the way. You can see as we push that, the skin tones get nicer. We get some deeper greens, some more cyan blues, more tealish color, just kind of a nice look. And you can add a little bit, or you can go if you go all the way, you get more of kind of that teal and orange type look. So this is really good for using as part of a look towards the end of your pipeline. Okay, moving on to number 8. This one is not just one DCTL, but actually a group of DCTLs. And that is the selection of IDTs that you can get from Thatcher Freeman. He has a wide variety of IDTs for cameras that are not natively supported in Resolve's color management system. The ones I find especially helpful are for DJI drones and for GoPro footage. To use these, you would just select the appropriate camera for your footage, and this would just replace your IDT. So it would actually go kind of right here. And then you can still work in a color managed fashion. Number 7 is Crosstalk from Color by Connor. Color Crosstalk is a great way to form and shape your color palette. However, the controls in Resolve and standard RGB mixers are not always the most intuitive. So what's nice about this DCTL is that it tries to simplify that process. Here, each slider shows a crosstalk vector so that when you slide each one, it compresses the color palette towards that selected axis. On the download page for this, he goes over this a little bit, but just as in my color crosstalk video where I showed adding green into blue or blue into green, how that can be a good way to compress the palette along the red cyan axis. But it's not exactly an intuitive way to do it. So what this DCTL does is takes how you think it probably should work and turns it into 3 nice sliders. So for example, if we want compress along the red cyan axis, we can move toward red or move toward cyan and get that behavior in a more intuitive way. And this goes with the other axes as well, green, magenta, and blue and yellow. So a simplified version of an RGB mixer that works in a very powerful manner. Another nice thing here is the Preserve Luma slider, which works similar to this, except you can control the amount that you're applying. It's not an all or nothing thing. So if you like color crosstalk but are looking for a slightly different way to approach it, give this DCTL a try. Number 6 is Filmic Contrast from Moaz El Gabri. This is a really nice contrast DCTL for look development. This isn't something you'd want to use shot to shot, but to create your curve at the look level. Down here you can click to see your curve that you're creating, and I'll just add in some contrast here. And what's nice is you can change either linear or rolled off and more of an S curve to even start with. And then you can go in and you can change your pivot, but I'll leave that at the default. Then you have your white point adjustments, and you can change the shoulder and also how it falls off. And you can do that with same thing with the black point. You can add your toe and the amount of fall off here. It's very nice. There's also preserved color, so if you want to keep all the saturation from adding the contrast or none of it, you can do that as well. There's also some other interesting options here. I'm going to hop back to my parade here. You can see with the luminance channel, the pop mids, how the mids kind of stay the same. They can, and everything else kind of moves down, or if you go negative, everything else moves up. Some interesting effects here. Also a flare tool, if you want to fine tune that as well. So a really nice tool with lots of options for building your contrast curve in a filmic way. Okay, moving on to number 5 is FilmLab's Split from Rocket Rooster. This is a really nice split toning DCTL with lots of options. Here you can also show your curve to see what you're doing. I think very intuitive controls here. You can change your amount of split toning on the low end and the high end. I'll just put in a little bit of the default color here. You can change your colors based on the hue. There's also this invert effect where you can flip them and then change your inverted color as well. So you can get some interesting things going on there. You can also choose the amount of color in your deepest blacks here. Or if you want to try to keep them as clean as possible. And same goes for the higher end here. You can change your high amounts and your highlight color, inverted options, and clean white in the same manner. You can change your midpoint, even though most of the time you're going to probably want to keep that at middle gray, but it's nice to have options, especially for warm or cool washes. One thing I really like with this tool too is you can change the width of the midpoint. So if you want to keep things cleaner around middle gray and around where your exposure is, especially for skin in the shadows, if you want to keep them from getting too blue or cyan, you can add some width here and only have the split toning more towards the lower end and a little more towards the high end. So still get some nice split toning, but a cleaner look. So a very nice DCTL there for creating a split tone. So coming in at number 4 is the Checkers DCTL from Pixel Tools. This one I really like because it's like an added scope that is really easy to use. I put a linear note here for adjustments so we can see, but here's our checker. And just a quick note here, this is going to be used after the adjustments that you're checking, but before your ODT, because the way this is designed, it's set up for a scene referred space. So first off, there's a false color checker. So you can check exposure, and there's a nice little guide here for middle gray and stops above or below middle gray. So here, if I just use linear gain to change exposure, you can see how it changes with it. There's a skin checker, so you can see where your skin tones are landing, either on the red side or the yellow side, or if they're kind of right where you want them. So if I go to my adjustment node here, you can see if I go a little more towards this way, they'll show up more green or too yellow, and the opposite here, too red and magenta, it'll show there. And you can also change the angle that is showing up here if you'd like to do so for creative reasons, if you'd like skin to land in a different spot. The white balance checker is really nice if you're trying to make your neutrals neutral. The shot is pretty well balanced already, but if you can see if I move it around, the areas that are neutral show up green. You also have some other checkers here. You can see what is at middle gray. You can check for negatives. There aren't any on this image, but that's nice as well. You can turn on or off the guides, and split view is nice too if you want to see what's happening in one with your original image. So you can adjust the image and then see what's going on with the checkers. So a really nice DCTL. Okay, number 3 is Saturator from Iridescent Color. This is a really nice tool for adding subtractive saturation in a clean way and also controlling the higher saturated values. In my last video, I went over how to do this inside of Resolve, but this is a really good tool if you want to go outside of Resolve, as it adds saturation in a really clean way and allows you to control things that are hard to control with the tools inside of Resolve. So if I pull up the vector scope here, we can add some subtractive saturation here, and you can control how much is subtractive. And the really nice thing here is with the sat limit. So you can pull this down to keep things from getting oversaturated, or if you want more of a Filmic color palette where the highest saturated values aren't that saturated, but there's still a lot of color depth in the image, this is really nice for that. So you can add quite a bit of saturation here without these outer values getting too far. So a really nice tool for adding subtractive saturation in a very controlled and clean way. Okay, number 2 is OpenDRT from Jed Smith. With how important picture formation is and how your image is formed with your ODT, to have one that it gives you a really good starting point makes a big difference. So OpenDRT is very helpful here to use in place of an ODT as your final output transform. I just have the default settings now, which are really nice, but there are other presets and looks that you can experiment with. One place where this really shines is with the higher saturated and higher luminance values. They are handled much better than Resolve CST. And I can give you a little comparison here. This is OpenDRT for this image, and here's Resolve's CST. And if you want to see how this is on one of the test images I've been showing, if you want to see a comparison here, this is OpenDRT, and this is Resolve's default CST. So it's a nice free DCTL to use in place of your ODT to just have a really nice starting point for your image that handles higher luminance and higher saturated values really well. And number 1 on my list is $24.99 DRT from Juan Pablo Zambrano. It might be a little anticlimactic to have 2 DRTs, ODTs here at the end, but just with how important they are and how well done they are, I felt it only fitting that those would have to be the top spots. So as with OpenDRT, this just does a really nice job of forming the image in place of a CST or other type of transform, whether that's manufacturer LUT or ASUS transform, anything like that. I think this, along with OpenDRT as well, give you such a nice starting point and handle things in a much more pleasing way. $24.99 has a little bit more of a creative look to it. There's a little bit of a pleasing hue shift going on as its starting point, but if we look at it here, there's a way to customize any of that. You can rotate the overall hues for red, green, and blue, the highlight hues for those, purity, which is basically saturation for any of those. So you can change those around and tweak those if you would like, but the default settings are really quite good. And here I'll pull up the same test image here. Here's $24.99. And here's Resolve CST. I think what gives $24.99 the edge for me and why I put it at number 1 is there are companion DCTLs that you can get for these. This custom curves for log $24.99, as well as some split tone presets. To use these, you just want to get into $24.99 log. So I have another $24.99 DCTL here, and instead of going out to BT 1886, I'm going to go into this $24.99 log intermediate space, and then you'll just need to change your input space to the same thing. So now we have the same starting point, but we have a space here that we can use these creative tools in. So I'll turn this on. So there are some nice print presets that I really like. There's some negative ones too. But just to get a good creative starting point here, if you want, instead of doing all this in your look development, you can also change the split tone strength and the contrast strength, depending on how much of that you want to add. You can also change saturation and push and pull. And another one here is the custom curves. There are just more controls here that are nice to be able to use. So that is my top 10 list. There are links for where to find these in the video description. If you're wondering about the thumbnail on this video, that's just this image right here. I took a couple of these and combined them to make a slightly different look there that I thought looked kind of good. These are fun to just play around with. I also want to give a big thanks to Kauer Hendrickson, who has compiled a list of places to find all these. It's a really nice site that really groups all of these together and makes things easy to find and a good resource for a bunch of tools like these. And the link for that is in the description as well. So thanks so much for watching. If there's any tool that you think should have been on this list and isn't, please comment below, and I'll see you next time.